Hello, my name is Steve Power and I'm one of the product specialists here at Pegasus Software. My aim over the next 30 minutes or so is to concentrate on the Pegasus Opera 3 supply chain suite of applications to give you an overview of both the power and the flexibility that Opera 3 can bring to your business. I will show you how flexible the supply chain system is and how easy it is to extract information and analyse that data in many different ways. The core of the Pegasus supply chain system is the sales order processing application. There are two variants of the sales order processing system. There's an invoicing option, which allows you to simply enter sales orders and then deliver them and invoice them. Or there's a sales order processing system that provides full control over the order process, from quotes to sales orders, allocations of stock, picking lists, delivery and invoicing. It is also possible to have back-to-back processing where purchase orders for bought-out items or works orders for manufactured items can be raised against the sales order where there is insufficient stock to satisfy that sales order demand. There's also two variants of the stock control system. There's a simple product file which allows you to set up products, have descriptions and set prices, or there's a full stock control system that allows you to enter stock transactions from the invoicing, from the sales orders and from receipts into stock. Whether you're running either the invoicing or the sales order processing system, both will link to the sales ledger to share the customer records such as the name and addresses, but will also post sales invoices to the customer accounts for debt chasing. The CRM system can be used to create both quotes and sales documents, which can be progressed to invoices within the invoicing or the SOP system. This is typically used where a customer requests a quote, or if using the service management system, any repairs or work undertaken are to be invoiced to the customer. It is also possible to set up customers as cash accounts where the system posts the cash at the same time as raising the invoice, ideal in those environments where customers do not have credit terms and pay in cash for products or services. In this presentation, I will concentrate primarily on the sales order processing system to show you some of the many features that make the Opera 3 supply chain management system so flexible. The typical flow within the sales order processing system is shown in this slide. The normal start point is a sales order, but in Opera 3 you can start this process with a quote or with a pro forma invoice, which then get converted through to sales orders. If you're using the sales order processing system linked to the stock control, then you can allocate stock to that line of the sales order. This can be done manually or as an automatic process, depending on how you decide to set up the system. If you're doing this automatically, then you can assign priority levels to customers, and the system will consider this when allocating the available stock to those outstanding sales orders. Or you could simply not use allocations at all. Optionally, you can use pick lists. You can optionally produce delivery notes and then convert them to sales invoices, or simply go straight from the sales order to an invoice. This can be run individually for each sales order, or it can be run as a batch where many sales orders are lumped together and processed in one routine, useful where there are heavy order entry requirements and dispatch documentation is typically produced at the end of the day. It's all about flexibility. Some customers will let their stock figures go negative, others won't. Some won't even use stock at all. Okay, let's have a look at the software. Here is the typical user interface for Opera 3. We adopt this ribbon bar type approach where across the top of the system you have the main functions that are available to you, and below the main system you have the applications that are available to you. In this example we have the sales order processing, the purchase order processing, the stock control and the bill of materials. Let's start by looking at pricing of the items that your customers will be buying from you. I'm going into the stock system here, and here's a typical stock record in this example for a small car mat, and we can see that the sales price here is set up as £12. We can also see that we have a standard cost and we have a last buy cost here as well. We can set up price lists and assign price lists to your customers. Here I'm looking at the special prices. Here's a list of the price lists that I have. I'm selecting a particular price list, and I'm looking at the details for that price list. So what we see here is for that small car mat, we have the price of £12 from the stock system. Do we actually have a sale price? If so, what is that sale price and what is the start and end date of that sale? This is the next selling price. This will replace the selling price shown in the price field above on the date specified in the next start date. This allows you to set up price changes in advance. It also allows us to go through and define quantity breaks. So in this example, if we buy greater than 10, we'll get a price of $10.99. If we buy greater than 25, we'll get a price of $10.49. If we buy greater than 100, then we'll get a price of $9.49. So it allows you to go through and set up these quantity breaks assign them to a price list, and then assign that price list through to a customer. Alternatively, we could set up discounts, in which case we can set up a discount matrix and apply that through to individual customers or to groups of customers. In this example, we have a discount here of 5% for Bart Williams. We could, however, apply this to a group. If I go to the next record, I can see that this is applied to a discount group 1. It has a number of discounts that are associated on quantity breaks. So if somebody buys above 2, they get a 2% discount. If they buy above 5, they get a 3% discount. If they buy above 10, they get a 5% discount. Notice also it is allocated to a product group. So we can set this system up to have groups of customers linked to groups of products that have this discount matrix. Again, it's all about flexibility within the Opera 3 system. Okay, let's go and have a look at sales order processing. Sales order processing is basically a document progression system from an initial document until it finally becomes an invoice. In Opera 3, a typical sequence might be a quote or a pro forma invoice to a sales order, then the sales order to a delivery note, and then finally the delivery note through to an invoice. You can start at any point within this chain, you can skip any of the stages, and you can edit the documents at any point until it becomes an invoice, at which point you'll then need to create a credit note to reverse those invoice transactions. Okay, let's put a sales order into the system. I'm going to sales order processing, and I'm going to the option here to create a new order. Notice I can enter a delivery address. If, however, I have accounts that have a whole range of delivery addresses, I can preset them up here within the sales ledger and it will automatically pull through those delivery addresses. I can put in the customer reference. Let's say we've got a purchase order 1000 from this particular customer. I can define the due date for this order and I can define the priority. This priority has been brought across from the customer record itself. And remember, it will use this priority if we're using allocations and there's insufficient stock. It will look at the stock quantity and it will look at the priority associated with that particular customer. Okay, let's save this header away. And let's go through and enter some lines. The customer is going to order that small car mat from me. So I'm entering car mat. It shows me I have 3 car mats within the system, and it shows me that the price of the car mat is £12 and I have 401 of those in stock. I'm going to select that car mat. I'm going to change the quantity. I'm going to change the quantity to 10. Notice the price has changed from £12 to £10.99. In other words, it's now looking at that quantity break price list that I've set up. If I change this quantity to say 30, it now drops the price to £10.49. If I change this quantity to be 100, it changes the price to £9.49. In other words, you can see that it is using that price list to select that particular price for this customer. It also allows me to go through and enter the due date if it's different to the header for this particular order, and it also allows me to change the priority on this particular line. Okay, on the second line of this order, I'm just going to put a text item on. In other words, it exists in my stock file, but only as a text description. And I'm going to choose this postage option. It's pulled in the text description. I want a quantity of 1 that's on these. I'm going to analyze this through to shipping. And I'm going to say that this is £10 to the customer. So the system allows us to set up text-only descriptive items that can be added into the sales order. For the third line, I'm not going to call anything from stock at all. I'm just simply going to put in a description-only item. And let's say I'm going to call this, I don't know, insurance. So they don't even have to exist in stock to put them onto a sales order. Again, I'm going to associate this with shipping. And I'm going to say that the value of this is, I don't know, £20. The final item I'm going to put on is a car stereo. So I'm entering stereo. It shows me all the car stereos that I've got. The one that this customer is asking for is this stereo here, stereo CD player with sat nav. Notice it's telling me that I've got none in stock. It's telling me there's insufficient stock. I therefore have an option. Do I want to raise a back-to-back purchase order? I have none in stock. Do I raise a purchase order on the supplier to satisfy this sales order? Or If it's a manufactured item, do I want to raise a works order? In which case, it will initiate manufacture within my organisation to satisfy this sales order. In my example here, I'm going to say that I want a back-to-back purchase order raised. And now I'm going to save this sales order away. There's a copy of the order. If this customer was set up to receive emails, then I could have sent this, as opposed to a printed order, I could have sent it through as an email to the customer. Because I have document management installed, it's now asking me, do I want to store a document associated with this? If I have their purchase order sent to me, I might have scanned that purchase order in which case I might want to go through and attach that purchase order to this particular sales order that I've just entered onto the system. I'm going to say no because I don't have that scanned in order. Okay, let's go to purchase order processing because we now have a back-to-back order that's sitting on there. So I'm going into purchase order processing. I'm going to select back-to-back. I'm going to select my customer. And it's showing me various things like, do I want due dates for these back-to-back orders? I'm just selecting my particular customer. And it's showing me that one back-to-back order. It's going to be ordered from David Corn at that price. And in fact, that price is actually in euros. I'm going to simply progress this order. If I now go into purchase order documents, locate the David Corn suppliers account, and I now see that there's uncommitted purchase order raised today for that 179 euros. I could take this option here to optimize. And what this basically will do is this will pull a whole range of documents that are outstanding and merge them together into one purchase order for this particular supplier. If I select this option, it shows me all of the orders that are on there. If I select a particular order, I can actually query that order. So my first one here, this is a large car mat. What it's telling me here is that for this particular supplier, there is actually another supplier that has a better vendor rating, and that's the supplier code. However, this supplier has the best lead time, and this supplier has the best cost price. If we go to our stereo radio and do a query, what we can see here is that yes, it's the best supplier based on its vendor rating. However, we have a lead time of 5 days from a different supplier, GRO001, and we also have a better price from this supplier here at 119. So this can be quite useful. If you're going through trying to choose which ones to select, it gives you useful information to tell you which other suppliers can supply it in a better time or at a better price. In my case, however, I'm simply going to go through and choose this particular order, and I'm going to commit this document to become a purchase order. I'm going to send this document through to a file. It's warning me, if I raise this purchase order, I will be over my credit limit with this particular supplier. Do I wish to proceed? Yes, I do. And that has now created the purchase order document for this particular supplier. Okay, let's say now that this supplier has delivered this item to us. So I'm going into purchase order processing. I'm going to David Corn's account, and I can simply choose receipts. Which purchase order? Yes, it's that last purchase order that I've just raised. Any reference? Yeah, there was a delivery note number on it. There was a shipping reference. And I'm saying OK at this point. It therefore shows me the details of this line of the order. Yes, it was this particular radio with sat-nav. What's the quantity that's been received? I'm going to say that I've received one of those and the quality of that is fine. And I'm simply going to save that away. This is one way to post receipts into stock. I could, however, simply go to the stock system, and for any stock record I could simply post a receipt, in which case it bypasses the purchase order processing system. Or if I'm having receipts in bulk, then as part of the stock system I can use this GRN approach and I can enter multiple receipts into stock. Now that we have the items in stock, we would expect to receive the purchase invoice from the supplier. So we could simply go into the account system, we could go into the purchase side, call up David Corn, and simply enter their purchase invoice. That's one way of doing it, but we also have the ability to use a purchase invoice register. let's actually enter this purchase invoice via the register. So I'm going to locate David Corn. I'm going to do action and say that there is a new invoice from David Corn. What's the invoice number? IMV 1000. What's the value of this? It's €179. It's converting it into the sterling value. And I might want to assign this to an individual, so I'm going to assign it to Larry Futton. Where does this purchase invoice come from? Does it come from a purchase order, from a delivery, or does it come from neither of those? I'm going to say this comes from a delivery. And therefore I'm going to go through and I'm going to select that particular delivery note. And there we go. It was this item that was delivered today. I'm going to select that particular item. I can also zoom into it just to confirm that it is the correct purchase order. And here's the image of that particular purchase order. Yes, that's correct. So I'm going to process this through. It's just confirming the item that's been delivered. And I'm going to say, yes, that's correct. It's now asking me, do I want to capture a document to this particular purchase invoice? If the purchase invoice has come in and I've scanned that particular purchase invoice, I might want to attach that image to the purchase invoice that lives in Opera 3. In my example here, I'm going to say, no, I don't have that scanned image. Notice now we have this particular purchase invoice on there and we can see that it's assigned to this particular individual. I can set up an authorization process. If I don't have sufficient security, then obviously I can't authorize this particular purchase invoice. However, if I do have sufficient security, I can therefore go into this option. I can authorize this particular purchase invoice. Which one? I'm going to authorize this David Corn one. So I'm simply going to go through, select that David Corn one. And notice now it's marked as authorized. Once it's authorized, I can therefore simply post it through to the ledger. And here's a list of all those authorized purchase invoices. Do I want to go through and post them through to the ledger? So I'm going to select that item and I'm going to say, yes, post that through to the ledger. And now we can see that its status is posted. That now lives as a purchase invoice within the purchase ledger for payment in its normal payment terms. Now remember, you don't have to go to this level. You can raise a purchase order, enter the purchase invoice, or you could simply omit the purchase orders totally and just enter a purchase invoice from a supplier. It's all about flexibility. You decide the level that you want to run this through to. Before I leave purchase order processing, however, let's just go and have a look at a couple of other options. So I'm going into purchase order processing. I'm going into the action button and I'm looking at something called reorder. This basically shows me all stock that is below its reorder level. So in this case, for instance, I can see that I've got an item here that has a reorder level of 1,000. It currently has 200 in stock. So in which case, it's suggesting that I need to go through and reorder this. I can also be selected by warehouse as well. In my example here, I've got all warehouses, but I might say that no, I only want the main warehouse. And therefore, it shows me stock that's at the main warehouse that's at or below its reorder level. So this would allow me to raise purchase orders in bulk, and I can be selective as to those that I want to go through and raise. It also has the concept of model purchase orders. So in other words, if you've got a standard set of items that you order from a supplier month in, month out, you could set up a model of that. And in which case, from that model, you could simply create the purchase order. If I want to go and look at this particular model, so I'm going to look at the lines. This one I order 2 lines, and these are the quantities that I order on this particular model. But I could go through and I could edit those and change this particular model. And in which case, once I'm happy with that, I could therefore simply go through and say process that model and generate the purchase order for me. Okay, let's go back to the sales order processing system. We now have the stocking of that radio for our particular customer. Let's go through and let's see how we can deliver these items to the customer. So I'm going to sales order processing, and I can simply go through here and I can create a delivery note, and then I can go through and create an invoice. That's fine if I want to do it individually, but if I've got a whole range of sales orders on the system and I want to deliver them in bulk, or if I've got a whole range of sales orders on the system and I want to allocate stock to those sales orders, then there are other options available to me. First of all, I have the option here for allocations. If I go into allocations and take this option to show me all the items that are allocated, what I can see here is, here are all the outstanding sales orders, here's the outstanding quantity, here's the quantity that's been allocated. And what the system will automatically do is it will allocate stock to those sales orders. If, however, there's insufficient stock, it will then look at the priority on that line of the sales order and it will base it upon that particular priority. So here, for instance, we can see that some of them it is allocating, but others there's insufficient stock, so it's not allocating those to it. In my example, however, let's go back and abandon that and let's go through and do the allocations again, but let's just do it for our particular customer. So I'm selecting our Adams customer. And here I can see that against their purchase order that I raised earlier on, I can see that the system has allocated 10 of the car mats and it's also allocated one of those radios that we've just ordered in. Yes, I'm happy with that, so I'm going to select that. That stock is now allocated to those particular orders. Okay, let's go and deliver these on bulk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this option here for batch processing. It allows me to select a whole range of documents. It allows me to go through and select a whole range of customers and a whole range of dates. In my case, I'm simply going to select the orders that need to be delivered. And I'm going to select this particular date range. And here is a list of all the sales orders that can be delivered. Some of them are marked automatically as yes, they can be delivered. Some of them are marked with an asterisk. If I select those, I can see I've got a warning triangle here and it's telling me that they're over credit limit. I can look at this and I can actually go down and have a look at the exceptions. Are they over credit limit or are they on stop or are they both? It will show me this information in this item. If I have sufficient security, I can go through and I can override this credit stop status. In my case, I'm going to say override all accounts that are over credit limit. If I select that, notice it's now said that they are all selected for delivery. So we have control over this delivery process. Okay, in my case, I'm not intending to deliver all these. I'm going to reverse this selection and I'm simply going to go through and choose our purchase order 1000 for Adams. And that's the one that I'm going to go through and create the delivery note for. So I'm going to select that particular item. It's now marked as yes. And in which case, if I say OK, it's now going to allow me to go through and process that in bulk. Obviously, in my example here, I'm only doing one, but I could have done many. I'm going to send this through to a file. And I'm going to give the description of this file as Steve's delivery notes. And I'm going to publish that. Because I said created as a file, what it's actually done there is it's created a spooler file that we can then do things with. Let's go and actually have a look at that. So if I go into my admin program, go into spooler control, I can see that Steve's delivery notes are now created on there. If I go to the action button, I could print them, or in my case, let's simply view it. And there we go, there's the delivery note for that particular customer. Okay, we've now delivered that item to the customer. The next stage, I guess, is that we want to invoice that particular customer. Now, what we could do is we could use that batch processing option to do that on bulk. So if we've got a whole range of delivery notes that are being delivered, I can therefore convert them on bulk to the sales invoice. In this example, however, I'm simply going to go through to the sales order processing system and I'm going to go through and do it for our individual customer. So here's Adams that's on there and I'm going to go to the invoice option. And I'm now going to progress this from the delivery note to the invoice. This time, I'm going to send it as an email. What's the subject? Invoices for yesterday deliveries. In the body of the text, I'm going to say, please find attached our invoices. And I'm going to publish this. And here we go, here's the email to be sent through to that particular customer. If I open up the PDF, I can therefore see the invoice attached for that particular customer's record. Okay, let's go and have a look at the customer's account. So I'm going to the sales side, I'm looking at Adam's account, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to view the account, but I'm only going to look at the outstanding invoices. And here we go, we can see there's the invoice for purchase order 1000 for that particular value. If I double click that, I can therefore see the image of the invoice as well. And if I need to reprint this, then I've got the option to go through here and reprint that document. Okay, that covers the basics of the sales order processing system. Let's now have a look at the stock control system in a little bit more detail. Now remember, you don't have to use stock control. You can simply use the product file. However, let's have a look at some of the things that the stock control allows us to do. As part of the stock control, it allows us to go through and set up multiple warehouses. I can set up any number of warehouses that I want within the system, and when I define a warehouse, I can define whether it's a quarantine warehouse, in which case I might want to restrict the movements to that warehouse. Maybe I have receipts. I'm not allowing issues, I'm just allowing a transfer from that warehouse to another warehouse that will allow issues out of stock. It also allows you to go through and define the address of that, because if you're raising purchase orders, you might want them to be delivered to different warehouses. So it allows you to go through and set up those warehouses. It also allows you to go through and set up stock profiles. In this example here, you can see that I've got a stock profile which is described as box. I've set them up as a pack of 1,000. I've also identified that I'm allowed to split that pack. However, if I split that pack, there might be a surcharge that I want to put onto the sales invoice for opening that pack for that particular customer. Okay, also against these stock profiles, the system allows us to go through and say whether an item is serial number traceable. What that basically means is we can assign a serial number, and when we move it out of stock, we can select those serial numbers to be shipped through to the customer. We also have batch traceability. This is particularly useful in industries such as pharmaceuticals, where you get a batch of items that come into stock under a particular lot number, and therefore you can record that lot number against it. You can therefore issue them out through to the customer against that lot number. If you need to get into a recall situation, then the system has batch traceability that allows you to go through and identify where those items were shipped to. If we look at the next record, we can see that this one has been set up as decimal, and I've set it up to 2 decimal. It allows me to go through and define the number of decimals that I want for the transactions for this particular stock item. Notice also I've set this item here to be costed as the selling price is the cost price plus a 40% markup. So again, you've got this sort of flexibility that's available to you. There are different costing methods as well. You can define stock items as being FIFO. That's first in, first out. Stock issues are made from the oldest receipts first, and therefore stock can be valued at its FIFO basis. You can also set up as average cost. In-stock quantities are valued at the average of the cost of the items that are currently in stock. If you don't select the average cost, then it can go through and use it as standard cost as defined on the stock record itself. And therefore, when you do the stock valuations, it will look at these different costing methods. When you run the stock value report, the stock valuation report allows you to go through and actually specify you want it to be valued at the last buy price. So there's a lot of flexibility in there in the way that you're setting up this costing record. Okay, let's go and have a look at a stock record. I'm going to stock processing, looking at the stock record, and we have various things such as the description of the item, the stock code. We can have an extended description that's on there, and this can therefore be printed on the invoices and on the purchase orders. We have a sales code that allows us to go through and define which nominal account it will be posted to. We have a supply code, so when we're buying the items in, which nominal account do we want that to be posted to. And we also have the standard selling price, the standard cost price, the last buy cost. It is also showing us here things like the quantity in stock, the quantity allocated and therefore the free stock, the quantity that's currently in work in progress, the projected stock levels, and quantities that are on purchase order and quantities that are on sales orders. If I take the spyglass here off the in-stock quantity, double click that, I can see that it breaks it down to the various warehouses. So I can see that in the main warehouse I have 391 in stock, 10 allocated, and therefore 381 available. And it also shows me all of the other warehouses here. I can also drill down into those. If I want to look at purchase transactions, then it will show me all the purchase orders that are on that particular warehouse. Or if I want to go through and look at the sales orders, then I can see the sales orders that are being raised against that particular warehouse as well. So it allows you to go through and analyse this data in this way. If we look at the action button and choose options, for instance, is this product superseded by another product? If so, what is that product that supersedes it, and on what date does that supersession come into place? If I'm raising a sales order and there's none in stock, are there alternatives available? In which case, it will allow me to do that sort of upsell. If I go to the suppliers, it allows me to set up any number of suppliers that are supplying me this particular stock record. A supplier might be supplying me at a different cost price, it might have a different lead time, it might have a different supplier reference. I simply go through and set up each of my suppliers for those particular items. It also has the concept of landed costs. This becomes particularly important if you're buying materials from abroad, because it's not just the cost price of the item you're buying, there's going to be other costs associated with shipping it from abroad through to your warehouse. So in this example, for instance, you can see that we have an air transport cost, and this is set up as a percentage. This is set up as 2% of the line value cost. We also have an insurance charge that's being levied, and this is set up as £2.50 per item that's being delivered to us. We also have an aggregated type costing system. This is particularly useful for those where you have other items such as anti-dumping duty. And the anti-dumping duty may not just be applied to the cost price of the material. In my example here, the anti-dumping duty is also related to the air transport as well. And it's taking those both into account, and it's charged at 20% of that particular item. What's basically happening here is that it's looking at all these values, it's calculating those values to give you the landed cost for this particular item. So the standard cost for buying it from my supplier is £125, but there's also £30.50 of landed costs. When I do stock valuations and what have you, the system will actually look at this and report on this. We also have the ability to run global price uplifts. So if prices are changing, then it will allow me to go through and perform a global price change. I can choose the stock records that it's from or the stock categories that it's from. Is it for a product that's to be uplifted in the stock file? Is it related to a price list? Is it related to a warehouse? Is it related to supplier prices? So I can be selective with which area I want to upgrade this, and I can define whether it's by a percentage or whether it's by a value. Okay, within the stock system itself, if you're not using purchase order processing, then we can simply go through and we can post receipts into stock. We also have the option to go through and run a goods received note system. This allows us to do movements into stock in bulk. If I go through and I create a new goods received note, it allows me to go through and define the delivery reference. I don't know, delivery reference. What's the date of this? It then allows me to go through and put the details on. So is this goods received note related to purchase order receipts, or is it goods received related to just direct movements into stock? So I can be selected. If I'm using the purchase order system, I can do it in bulk from the purchase order system. If, however, I'm not, I can simply say, no, it's nothing to do with the purchase order system. I'm just entering a whole range of items into stock. So this can be a rapid way of doing stock movements as opposed to doing them individually from the stock record or from the purchase order. Okay, so we've looked at stock receipts there. We've looked at stock receipts coming from purchase order processing. We've just looked at stock receipts coming from the goods received note, and we've seen how we can do direct receipts into stock using the stock system. However, there is a fourth method. That is using the bill of materials. The bill of materials system allows you to go through and define items that are manufactured from their components, in which case we can therefore go through and we can raise a works order that's going to initiate the manufacture. We can allocate the component stock to that works order. We can issue that component stock so that it takes it out of stock, and then when the works order is complete, we can complete the works order and it will move into stock the finished goods. We also have this kitting option, and if this is turned on, what this basically means is when the works order is created, the assembly is immediately moved into stock and the components are immediately moved out of stock. This is a useful way to simply control the stock levels without having to go through the full manufacturing process. Let's have a look at a particular bill of materials. I'm looking at this a roadside assist pack. We're going to go through and let's have a look at the components. And here's the bill of materials for this particular item. We can see that it's got a maintenance kit, and if I expand that, that is a maintenance kit, which is an assembly, and it's made of all these particular components that go into that particular assembly. We can also see that we have a box of spare bulbs, and we can see all of the spare bulbs that go into that box of spare bulbs. So it allows you to go through and set up the main assembly, the sub-assemblies, and the components linked into those sub-assemblies. It also allows you to go through and define items of labour which will be built into the costing for this particular item. Okay, let's go through and let's manufacture this. I'm going to set this as a kitting item and save that away. I'm now simply going to go through and I'm going to generate a works order. I'm going to create a new works order. I'm going to say that this works order is for works order reference of 1000. The quantity is to be 10. And I'm going to commit this works order. It shows me all of the components, and yes, I'm happy with each of those quantities on there, so I'm just going to simply select that. and it's going to generate the works order. And there we go, there's the works order for this particular item. What it's showing me here is it's showing me all the components that are required, it's showing me the material cost, the labour cost, and it's giving me the overall cost for this particular works order. Because I set that works order as kitting, what it has now done is immediately move those items into stock. If I go and view that, what I can see now is for our main warehouse, I can see the stock is 24, and I can see there's a receipt into stock at today's date for that works order, and the quantity is of 10, and that's the price for those items. Okay, let's go through and have a look at some of the reports. In Stock System, we have something called View, and in fact this View option is available throughout Opera 3. It allows the user to go through and set up different views of the data, and you can set up any number of these views. In this example, I've got a couple that are set up for the Stock System. I'm going to look at stock movements for today. So I'm going to select Today Only. I'm going to change the criteria because I want to see not only issues, but I also want to see receipts. But on the stock view, I can be selective. Do I want it to be by warehouse, by stock record, by profile, by supply code? So I can be very selective in the data that's going to be displayed. In my case, I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to refresh this view. It's now showing me in this example issues that have been made today and receipts that have come into stock today. If I look at the issues, I can see that we've got an issue of the car mat. Yes, we did deliver that car mat. If I drill into this, I can see that it was an issue. It was against that delivery note, and it was to that account, and that was the date that it was delivered. So I can see that I've issued that out of stock. And similarly, if I go to the radio, I can see that radio was issued out to that account on that delivery note to that particular customer. However, we can also see that we've got issues of things like the foot pump and the car jack. Remember, these were issues that were made from that bill of materials. So these were the components that were issued out of stock. Yes, they were issued out of stock. This was the works order that they were issued to, and that was the quantity that was issued to that works order. So it allows me to drill down into the issues in this example for today. The reverse side, of course, is I can see the receipts into stock. And yes, we did get that radio from that supplier, so I can look at this and I can see, yes, it was a receipt, it's to that supplier's account, and it was on that delivery note from that supplier on that date. We also have another receipt into stock, which was that roadside assist pack that came from the works order. If I drill down into this, I can see that it was a receipt, it was against that works order, and that was the date, and that was the quantity that came into stock. So it allows us to go through and interrogate stock in all sorts of different ways. Okay, let's just have a look at a couple of the reports. Let's go through into the stock reports. Let's look at the stock valuation report, for instance. I can be selective on the stock records, but I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to run this report straight through the screen. And here we go, here's the stock valuation report. What it shows me here, for instance, for my small car mat, it shows me what's the quantity in stock, what's the cost price, including the landed cost, what's the selling price, and therefore what's the total costs of in stock, included landed costs, selling price, potential profit, and therefore the margin that I'm going to make. And therefore this goes through for all of the stock records that are in that selected range. Let's run that stock valuation report again, but this time I'm not going to print it to screen. I'm going to take this option to send it through to Excel. In other words, many of the reports within Opera 3 can be directly sent through to Excel. So let's publish this report, but this time it's going to create an Excel spreadsheet which shows me all of that information. And here we go, here's the spreadsheet, and once it's in the spreadsheet I can therefore go through and I can do whatever calculations, whatever manipulation of this data I wish to. Now, we've only got a limited amount of time to go through and show you this, but there are other things that we have in here. We have, as part of the stock system, for instance, we have the return to vendor. So if you've got goods that are being sent back to your suppliers, then there's a system that proves that. We also have stock take utilities as well. So if you want to count the stock and you want to make sure the stock levels are accurate, then this will allow you to count the stock and update the stock levels based upon those stock take figures. Okay, in conclusion, what have we just seen? Well, we've looked at the Opera 3 supply chain management system, and we see that we have both a sales order processing system or an invoicing system, so depending upon the level of complexity that we want. We've seen that from those orders we can raise back-to-back orders, so if it's items that we need to purchase them from our suppliers, and we can raise the back-to-back order, or if it's items that we need to manufacture, then we can go through and manufacture those items off the back of the sales orders. We've seen that the stock control system has two versions. It has a simple product file, but it also has a full stock control system where it tracks all of the items from stock. We can see that it's fully integrated into the sales ledger, we can see that it's simple to use and it's actually in use by tens of thousands of customers. Thank you for spending time looking at the Pegasus Opera 3 supply chain management system. For further information, please go to pegasus.co.uk and select Find a Partner.